Warning. The following podcast contains spoilers for the film discussed, as well as strong language. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, Internet. This is How Have We Not Seen. I'm Mitchell.
I'm Juliet.
I'm Nate.
And today, what are we watching, Juliet?
Today we are watching one of my favorites and one of my mom's favorites, Ever After. Alright. What was that noise for?
Well, this is going to be my answer to the inevitable question that you ask.
How have you not seen this movie? Nathaniel.
I absolutely despise the Cinderella story. I hate just about every modern interpretation of fairy tales except for the ones that go back to how fucking dark these things used to be.
See, I have a feeling you might like this one because there's a bit of darkness in this one. Different from the fairy tale, but it's still dark.
Allow me to ask, your version of dark or my version of dark?
I can't really explain the darkness in this movie. It's not dark as in how the Grimm brothers version was dark with the gore and everything. It's more dark with some of the themes it deals with and with some of the characters.
I don't know, the Grimm stories were also pretty messed up in terms of characters.
True.
Yeah.
You'll find out more as the movie goes on. Mitch, how have you not seen this movie?
Two reasons. One, never heard of it before.
Fair.
And two, I've never really been into, the whole Disney classics and whatnot.
This isn't Disney, though.
Yeah, that's true. I've just never really been into that kind of stuff.
Alright, so before we get into the second question, I just wanted to point out that this was a movie my mom and I loved, and one night we were home and my dad thought, alright, fine, I'll just watch this movie, that way I can, it'll make my wife and daughter happy, that kind of thing. And then he watched it, and then when it was done, he went, that was actually okay. Which is high praise for him talking about a movie like this. And people that I've talked to, at work, who've seen this movie, they say, oh yeah, it's a good movie, very sweet. Alright, so guys, second question, what do you think this movie is going to be like? And are there any questions that you may have?
I am expecting now they won't be able to see my air quotes, but there will be air quotes, realistic version of the Cinderella story. Or perhaps a story that serves as the inspiration to the Grimm brothers about the Cinderella story. Even though in real life the Cinderella story is really old and is told across multiple cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah. There's even a Chinese version of the Cinderella story.
Ooh.
I would not say that this movie is trying to claim that this story was based on an actual historical event. I think they thought it would be fun to maybe weave some famous people from European history into this story. Just for fun.
Please don't tell me Shakespeare's going to show up in this.
No. Shakespeare is not in this movie. Any person who shows up in this movie that is from history, it makes sense as to why they are there.
Shakespeare shows up and starts, breakdancing
No,
for no reason.
No. They're very loyal to the time period. I will say, this movie does get stuff wrong, but it also does get a few things right. And I can't wait for you to get to the nitpicks, considering you're the history buff.
Alright.
Mitch, what do you think this movie's going to be like, and do you have any questions?
Just based on how dark you were talking about how this is going to be, and based on the fact that it's called Ever After, and not Happily Ever After, which I'm guessing that was on purpose. It's going to be a kind of serious drama, with some family-friendly kind of stuff, I'm guessing.
Okay.
And I have no idea what the heck is going to be up with the whole historical thing, because that would be interesting.
It's like the Salt Bay meme. Got little bits of history sprinkled in the movie.
Salt Bay. Oh, what a meme.
Did you honestly make that reference? Oh, God.
Yes, I did, Nate. Yes, I damn well did.
You are by far the least stank member of this podcast.
I know, but that's what I thought of, and I will not redact it, and we shall not cut it out of the episode. Okay, we are going to take a brief interlude, and when we come back, we are going to discuss our thoughts on the 1990s classic, Ever After. See you guys in a few minutes.
Wish us luck.
We're going to eat it.
No, you won't. And we are back! We have just finished watching Ever After, and now it is my turn to ask, guys, what do you think of this movie now that you have finally watched it? And Nate, I'm going to ask Mitch first on purpose because I want to save yours for last because I have a feeling it's going to be very good and very passionate. Alright. Mitch, your thoughts?
I liked it. It wasn't as dark as I was expecting. It was a lot more family friendly, which doesn't really surprise me too much, but I thought it was good. I liked the little ways that they took the Cinderella story and changed it to fit the plot a lot better in terms of how they focused less on like the whole fairy godmother thing and fantastical elements and more on like somewhat realistic parts about it. It's not a perfect movie, but it was pretty good.
All right, Nate, same question. What did you think? I'm cowering behind Mitch right now.
She's literally like
Although there
me.
were some good lines,
Okay.
some good scenes,
Okay.
and some good characters. Leonardo da Vinci.
He was a bro in this movie. Yeah, Da Vinci's in this movie, but we'll get into that later.
This movie ultimately fails at what it's actually trying to do. Allow me to elaborate. This movie is expressed as a true account of the Cinderella story. The whole framing device of this movie is the lady telling the story to the Brothers Grimm, saying, "Oh, you know, the LOL, you scrubs with your fairy tales. Here's what actually happened," instead of, you know, the folklore, which in itself is problematic. I think the reason why this is a failure is because despite trying to portray it as the real Cinderella story, ultimately there are many elements that are wacky, fictionalized, downright impossible, and it's more like they just try to get rid of the magic to try to make it the true Cinderella story, and yet there are a number of issues, and I'll get into them at length. Some of them are just some minor anachronisms. Like, you know, the bit where Henry's feeding Marguerite chocolate, and he's saying, like, the Spaniards sent it in by brick. Chocolate was not made in brick form until a good 250 years after that. In actuality, chocolate was a powder at the time that you would mix into, you know, like a...
Into water, right?
Yeah,
or
like a bitter cocoa
clean.
drink.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, you know, already that so on. That's just a minor thing. The time periods don't match up. I believe that they said that it takes place in 1512 with the very first scene with the kid.
Yeah, and then 10 years later, it's 1522.
Utopia by Thomas More was not published until 1516, which means that she would have gotten that book when she was 12, not 8. Oh, and Leonardo da Vinci, or Leonardo da Vinci, was already dead by 3 years by the time the majority of this movie takes place.
Wah, wah. But he was the painter in residence for the King of France.
You have to remember, this was not even quite the politics of the time that we know. It gets complicated, and the fact that they try to simplify it so much is quite frustrating. Some more anachronisms include the bit where they're like, divorce is something only the English do, when in actuality, the whole thing that they make them think of divorce, you know, King Henry VIII annulling his marriage to Queen Catherine of Aragon, that wasn't until like a good 12 years after this movie is supposed to take place. And the reason why that I'm focusing so much on these anachronisms and overall inaccuracies in regards to the setting is that if you are trying to substitute a fiction, like a fairy tale, with the real account, why do you stretch and break the truth so much to the point that it's just basically another fairy tale, but with Leonardo da Vinci replacing the fairy godmother?
You forgot to call him Leonardo da Vinci.
I apologize.
That's okay.
And just the fact that they did that was very frustrating in my opinion. What else was I
can think of the big thing. The gypsies.
Oh yeah, that was true. I think they don't like being called that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they said that in the movie.
Yeah, they were very...
Hey.
And also, one thing that also really bugged me with the very beginning, as soon as they were talking, I knew, oh boy, they're going to make this look real, but it ain't. When she's just calling the Brothers Grimm writers of fairy tales. First off, they did not write those stories. They collected them across Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, these guys were huge figures in linguistics. Like, the work they had done in that regard probably would have superseded all of the other, like, you know, the fairy tales that they had collected. Like, these guys were vastly important to developing a literary understanding of both folklore and language of Europe. These guys were legit. And the idea of the Cinderella story only being from the 1520s itself is problematic because the Cinderella story is this old concept.
Oh, yeah.
With variants all around the world, with the earliest known one being written down in the 7th century BC.
Was that the one that was in China?
The Greek slave girl.
Oh,
who
it was
falls
Greek.
in love and
Okay.
marries the king of Egypt.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
I actually didn't know that one.
So let me ask you this. What was worse? Ever After or Donnie Darko?
Wow.
Oh.
He's puzzling over this right now.
Okay, so I see that's where we're going with this.
Sorry, Mitch.
They're both different kinds of suck, so to say.
With two C's.
He's asking, do I want something that's absolutely disgusting, or do I want to put a toothpick under my toe and kick a wall?
Jesus Christ.
Because
Oh my god.
this movie just kind of fails at its purpose, but overall still has interesting bits. Donnie Darko had some interesting writing, interesting characterization, but ultimately I disagreed with the core message.
So it feels like you hate them both equally?
In different ways.
Mayhap.
Okay. Do we want to get into the character list of this movie, or do we want to point out any more historical inaccuracies?
Also, why is everybody speaking in British accents if they're French?
That's always a thing that happens in movies.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
You and I know this. In the 2004 Phantom of the Opera movie, they all spoke with British accents except for Madame Giry, and even she spoke with like a Pepe Le Pew French accent.
And there's also the Le Pew in this one.
Oh, God.
Oh, we'll get to him later. I've got a good anecdote about the actor.
Oh, boy.
All right, any other historical inaccuracies we want to point out before we get to the individual characters in the film itself?
Any historical inaccuracies that I want to get into that I can recall off the top of my head, I think they got the size of the Mona Lisa wrong.
Yeah, it's really small. Like, when you go to the Louvre, I've heard, it's, maybe about the size. There's a TV in front of us. Like, if you were to turn it the other way, it would probably be about that big?
Really?
Or maybe the size of, some of the posters hanging on the walls?
Yeah, the Mona Lisa's smaller than people think.
Huh.
Yeah.
It's even smaller now. It's been damaged over the years.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure.
Got some acid damage at the bottom, I think.
I'm not surprised.
Got stolen for a while.
Yep.
In fact, a lot of people argue that's what made it famous.
Yeah, I've
true.
seen the video
'Cause,
about that.
It's not really, remarkable other than the fact that it is remarkable.
And that people were like, oh, she's smiling in the painting. How do you get her to hold that smile for so long?
Well, it's not just... No. I think the fact is you can't quite figure out why she's smiling.
That's
if it
true,
is
the
a smile.
mystery.
It's the mysterious, sort of smile. You can put so many emotions behind it. That's why it's... But, I would argue that when he was like, it's my life! I wouldn't be surprised if he considered The Last Supper to be a bigger work than the Mona Lisa.
Yeah.
The Mona Lisa, I believe, isn't that more of a private thing he did?
Which painting was first?
Damned if I know.
No idea.
Please let us know in the comments, or maybe I'll just ask my dad later, because he would know. Anything else?
I'm sure more things will crop up as we talk about stuff.
Fair.
I wonder if they were intending this or not, but the fact that they had the widely believed to be homosexual Leonardo da Vinci replacing the fairy godmother, that...
I don't
was that
think that was-
deliberate? That might have been a bit mean.
No,
I'd like to hope it wasn't, but
No.
I don't think it was, honestly.
This movie came out in the late 1990s.
I mean,
I'm
even
pretty
then,
sure that was a
homophobia
term.
was still very rampant.
Oh no, it was very rampant. Yeah, don't ask, don't tell.
Oh, God, yeah.
Do we want to get into the characters?
Sure, let's go into the characters.
Alright, let's start with Danielle de Barbarac, our Cinderella character of this movie.
Oh, wow, look at you with your fancy schmancy, accurate French phonology.
Took it for 4 years. Alright, played by Drew Barrymore, by the way.
Yep.
I love her character.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree. She's great.
Yeah. Nate?
Well,
She, as a character, is good, but I do think that the class struggle she kind of represents gets a bit more troublesome later on in some aspects that we'll cover later. Let's talk more about some of the characters.
Okay.
one thing I do want to talk about Drew Barrymore, though, is the fact that she was both in this and Donnie Darko, which are two movies that Nate does not apparently like.
So does that mean every Drew Barrymore movie we show, Nate's gonna hate?
Hey, E.T. is a masterpiece.
That's true, that's
she was
true.
in E.T., that's
She was
right.
Little
Birdie.
sister!
Oh, man, that's right.
And when I was a kid at the release, I liked the Charlie's Angels movie.
Oh, I never saw that,
Yeah, I
actually.
forgot she was in that too. I think why a lot of the reason young women liked this movie when it came out was because this was a Cinderella that, for them, had backbone. Like, she stood up to the prince, she was well-read, educated, she wasn't afraid to call him out on his crap. She was a princess, but she had depth.
I do know that I believe someone did describe it as a post-feminist interpretation of the Cinderella story.
That I very much agree with.
Yeah, I could see that, definitely.
And, the feminist aspect of her is, pretty good. Like, you just said that she's got backbone, she talks back. But also at the same time, she's clearing the bar that the other story set before her. And not gonna lie, the Cinderella story's bar was a very low bar to clear.
Oh.
It's a very sexist story at its core.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, though...
But I'm thinking more about the classist stuff. And, oh my gosh, I'm accidentally fulfilling one of the things where they talk about in that movie about not letting ladies talk. I apologize.
Yeah, that's a theme in the movie. But what I wanted to say is, like, one of the things, it was in a book that I read where it talked about the Cinderella story, and someone wrote that the way they saw Cinderella was, it's a story about karma. When you put out a lot of good into the universe will reward you back one day. I don't know, I just thought that was an interesting take on it that I'd never considered before.
I actually
thought,
distaste that.
Yeah.
I understand that viewpoint, especially since, the whole point of the stepmother is, the whole point of her character almost is, like, she was treating Cinderella like garbage, therefore, at the end, she gets treated like garbage herself. And that's almost true in every single interpretation, pretty much, regardless of whatever punishment she gets.
Whether it be dancing with hot iron shoes or having your eyes pecked out by a bunch of birds.
Yeah, Nate in particular,
He wanted to see Baroness de Ghent wearing those iron shoes by the end of the movie.
You're chanting.
Get the iron shoes! Get the iron shoes!
But anyway, like you were just talking about that, the Cinderella story about karma. I absolutely detest that idea. That is complacency incarnate. The idea that just keep on enduring the bad things because eventually good things will happen to you. No.
Oh, yeah,
You gotta fucking fight for that shit.
Yeah.
She did fight in this movie.
Exactly, which I also think is kind of
Spitfire.
interesting that it just kind of deconstructs the whole Cinderella story from the outset, but also, just kind of collapses in upon itself by failing at its own core idea of, the realistic Cinderella story when they, have Leonardo da Vinci walking on water with boat shoes.
First of all, that was a great scene.
I know it was a great scene, but it's not a realistic scene, damn it. There needed to be more of him.
Why are we not calling him Leonardo Bro Vinci?
That's his new name! It's official!
Most of the time, when there is a character that's well-liked but only plays a small role, it's a bad idea to give him a bigger movie. But this Leonardo, Bro Vinci deserved a much bigger role because he was one of the few good things out of this entire thing, and you could still make a good movie about him.
I'd love to see a movie about this Leonardo Bro Vinci.
I would too. Alright, Prince Henry. Now, I will say that Henry has probably the biggest character arc in the entire movie. When he starts out, he is a spoiled prince, and his mother's right, he is born into a world of privilege, and with that comes specific obligations. And, he has no desire to be king, and as Danielle points out, you have everything, and still the world holds no joy. You own all the land there is, yet you take no pride in working it. And then, as he meets her and she just starts to talk to him, he realizes that he's not worthy of her, and that really the problem is him. Like, in that whole scene where she's in the library, and he's like, you have more conviction in these past 2 days than I have ever had in my life. And then she goes, I'm sorry, and he goes, no, it's not you. Just the transformation that he goes through from being a very arrogant prick to being and he still is for, like, the last part of the movie, especially with what he does to Danielle at the masquerade ball, which is horribly, horribly cruel, especially considering, like Da Vinci said, what she had to do in order to get there. But basically, it just shows that she brings out the best in him, and love is not something that just comes to you. You have to earn it, and you have to work for it. And he does work for it in this movie, and only then is he worthy of her. Thoughts on Henry? He
looks like if Antonio Banderas and Quentin Tarantino had sex.
Yeah, you literally said that in a movie, and I'm so glad you brought it up again.
I hope Dougray Scott never hears that.
What you were talking about with the whole character arc, that's like a classic character arc. That's been in a lot of movies, and I thought they did it pretty well. Mm-hmm. Like I said, it's classic, and you can't really go too wrong with it you can, but the way they did it was pretty good. I liked it. It made him a lot more likable at the end, and I felt it was kind of realistic in somewhat of a way. At least to what you were talking about with his obligations of being, like, royalty and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that it was very interesting that they have the idea of a prince who wishes to shirk his responsibilities as a royalty. Oftentimes is portrayed in a much more sympathetic manner, but I am surprised that they took it into the route of displaying his selfishness and that he just wants to shirk responsibilities even though he's the guy who's supposed to be doing this job.
Yeah.
Like, it isn't just, you get to, get hand-fed grapes by, servants. It's a job. Like, it's awful. Like, the system in place is awful, but,
Mhm.
you know, if you leave, that system's going to crumble, then it's just going to be complete anarchy.
Yeah, and he doesn't even want a simple life. Like, he doesn't want that either because, you know, he says the everyday rustic bores him and, like, ew, I don't want to talk to peasants. At one point, he calls the guy who takes away Leonardo's Mona Lisa an ugly peasant bastard. And, you know, even when he does something good by setting Danielle's servant Maurice free, she's like, yeah, you set one man free, but did you even bother to look at the others?
Yeah, I'm glad she pointed that out.
Yeah, it's like, even when he tries to do something right, he's still so shallow because he doesn't see any way out. And also, it's like, a lot of this movie would have been quicker if he just shut up and listened to what Danielle had to say to him. And she's like, I have to say something to you. He goes, oh, whatever it is, my answer is yes. I'm like, you bastard, just shut up and listen to what she has to say.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that scene where she was trying to tell him. And where were they? They were at some...
They're at the ball, and she was trying to tell him I'm really a servant, not a
No, what
courtier.
was the other one?
Oh, when they were in the ruins of Amboise, and she was in the red dress.
Yeah.
And she's like, you're not making this easy.
Yeah, that's like a major... I don't know if it's a trope, a cliche, whatever the hell it is. But that always is in a lot of, like, especially romantic movies where one partner is trying to tell the other partner something that could drastically change the story, but they never let them finish, and then they always, like, say something that makes the other person think about what they were going to say. And I'm not saying it's like a bad thing, but it always happens.
And in this one, it's really bad the way he does it, too.
That can safely be described as a cliche, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so too, honestly.
Yeah. This guy clearly just wants to eat his cake and have it too.
Yeah.
He wants to enjoy the perks of royalty, but he wants to avoid the work of royalty.
It seemed like it at first.
Yeah. Alright, let's talk about the Baroness Radmilla de Ghent, played wonderfully well by Angelica Houston and her arched eyebrows.
Ah, yeah.
Could those eyebrows go any higher on her head? Oh.
She did a fantastic job, in my opinion. I've only seen her as Morticia from the Addams Family, the most recent ones, which she did a fantastic job on as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think she did a great job in terms of making this very dislikable yet somewhat
human,
yeah, somewhat
Yeah.
more human stepmother
Yeah.
in the Cinderella story.
And she had the most cutting things to say to Danielle.
I do want to,
Oof.
like, that one section where she's trying to, like, almost compliment her, but she's still, like, railing on Danielle.
Yeah, it's like, you look like your dad. You're very masculine. No wonder you're built for hard labor. Ugh.
You could see the, like, spirit die from Danielle's eyes. It was
Yeah.
It was, like, so sad,
For me,
but also a little funny because of how
Yeah.
ridiculous that scene was.
I also like how they established that this was a woman Danielle wanted to have a relationship with because, again, her mother died when she was very young, so when her father remarried, she saw this as, like, a second chance of having a mother, and then when she says to the Baroness, did you love me at all? Can you imagine what it would be like if you asked your mother that question and she said what the Baroness said? How can anyone love a pebble in their shoe?
Now that was fucked up.
Like,
Yep.
holy hell.
I'd probably just be like, guess I'll die.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alright, I'll just go piss off then.
But I do think it's interesting that in this story that tries to be a transformative work that plays around with the archetypes displayed, that the wicked stepmother is like the least changed.
Yeah. I mean,
It is bog standard. She is the vain, petty, cruel lady, and like even the small bits of humanity she displays only serve to further highlight just how awful a person she is.
Mm-hmm.
There is no secret background aspect of her that changes her attitude, such as a little of Danielle, where, you know, Danielle, instead of just being the poor working girl, she is a sharp-witted feminist, basically, and then you have the prince who, instead of just being, you know, Mr. Perfect, is a boorish dickwad who learns to be less of a dick by the end of the movie. And then the stepmother is basically unchanged. She is just the asshole.
If anything, I'd argue that she gets worse and worse over the course of the movie, especially when she sells Danielle to Monsieur Le Pew at the end, because she's basically burned this farm to the ground by spending all the money, selling people off, and still pretending like she's living in a friggin' palace.
yeah.
Oh, that just reminds me of another anachronism. The way that Danielle tells Gustave how she's burning money. They didn't have paper money back then. They wouldn't have paper money for another while.
They could have, like, melted the coins.
They could have just had spent coin. I mean, That's, this movie didn't really try to focus on being historically accurate. It was more about the whole story itself.
No, I think the fact that they tried but only half-assed it is what's irritating.
Fireworks.
If they,
Oh my god. I remember as soon as
fireworks existed, but they weren't colored yet.
Yeah. I remember as soon as I saw the first explosion, I just started laughing because I could feel Nate just becoming tilted from 3 spaces behind me.
Especially also since Nate's a Chinese major, so he knows the origins of gunpowder very, very well.
I don't want to say that, but...
Well, you've definitely studied it, though, in your years of being a Chinese major, probably.
Yeah, a little bit, but that's a bit beside the point. All that I know is that fireworks were definitely not colored yet. And I don't know if they were actually in Europe yet.
What were they, just regular explosions?
They were basically, I guess a way to compare would almost be like a flashbang, a phosphorescent effect when it explodes.
Oh, alright.
Didn't the guy who invented fireworks, wasn't he trying to invent a medicine or something?
Yeah, the
elixir of immortality was a thing that a lot of Chinese alchemists were trying to invent.
Yeah.
With varying results. For example, the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huangdi. I probably butchered the tones still. I still can't get tones right. That guy was drinking something derived from mercury.
Oh.
And I don't mean a compound that uses mercury atoms, which can be safe, just as sodium chloride is safe. I'm talking he was drinking literal quicksilver.
Mercury.
Straight up.
While we're on the Baroness, how did you feel about the Schadenfreude moment at the end? When I first showed Dean this movie, he went, yes, yes, yes! He was just so happy at how they got their comeuppance.
Always good to get comeuppance against those assholes. But I feel like it highlights a classist issue that they don't seem to properly address. Alright, so I feel like they don't do enough to point out the issues of the society at the time, the classist elements of the society. I mean, they kind of do. Oh no, she's a peasant girl, now she can't marry the prince. Oh, the servants are being treated like garbage. But at the same time, they don't point out that even servants being treated well are still ultimately servants. Mm-hmm. They don't point out that the idea of a punishment is making them live like the servants. Just it sounds like a dick move to the servants, where it's the idea of oh, no, you aren't just some sort of unfortunate economic situation that can be gradually fixed. You're punishment.
I think Danielle kind of argues that when she's talking to Henry, when they're around the fire, and she's saying, people have labels, and they're always painted as such, but that is not who they are. Maybe that was the movie's way of trying to address it, but not getting too in-depth.
Like many other things in this movie, they half-assed it.
I'd say less half-assed, more went shallow deep.
And maybe contradicted themselves a little bit. Where they're hey, poor people aren't just defined by their poverty, but hey, let's make a joke about them being poor now.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from with that.
If you want to see a worse example of how movies portray the poor, watch My Fair Lady with Audrey Hepburn and Rex Harrison. That movie is the epitome of they may be poor, but at least they're happy. Alright, let's talk about the stepsisters, Marguerite and Jacqueline. Let's start with Marguerite. Oh, that's the poisonous beauty is the first thing I could think of in my mind. She is gorgeous, but god damn.
Marguerite must be beat. Jacqueline is without sin.
Hey! Yeah, that's something that I saw, you remember how Disney did, the direct-to-DVD sequels of their movies?
I try to pretend those don't exist.
Well, I remember when they did, the ones for Cinderella, they kind of tried to...
Didn't they do 2 of those?
Yeah, Cinderella 2 and Cinderella 3, which was actually, a really good direct-to-DVD sequel.
But, a polished turd is a turd nevertheless.
Well, one of the things they did in it was Drizella, they tried to keep the evil stepsister, and Anastasia they tried to make more sympathetic. But this was a movie that did it way before the direct-to-DVD Disney sequels came out, where it's you have the god-awful stepsister who's throwing herself at the prince and doesn't care what it'll do to others, and you have Jacqueline who is on Danielle's side, but because of how overbearing her mother and sister are, she kind of keeps quiet. She's not Nate was saying earlier, she's really dumb. I'm no, she's not dumb. She's just never given a chance to speak, and she's very unsure about how to act because she doesn't know what to do. It's does she side with her sister, or does she side
with her other sister?
With her other sister at the expense of
being yelled at and being ridiculed by her own mother.
Yeah.
And the one thing I do want to talk about with Marguerite is, you mentioned this about the Baroness earlier, how much like the original story, Well, she wasn't really changed that much from the original story whatsoever.
Oh, yeah, definitely not.
I feel like they kind of understood that they have to have these very unlikable characters to antagonize the audience against. Especially since it's a Cinderella story. That's the whole point of her character, that she's living with these awful, awful people.
Not every villain needs to have a sympathetic backstory or a relatable motive.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best villains are the villains who are just dicks.
Yeah.
And also, you remember how the Baroness was talking to Danielle about how the Baroness's mother was extremely forceful too? She was definitely replicating that with Marguerite, because I'd argue that Marguerite is like the Baroness 2.0, whose sole concern is just elevating her station in life while just being as much of a bitch as possible. Especially when, she burns the only thing that Danielle had left of her father, and then they whip her.
Yeah,
Where did they get the whip?
I don't want to know.
They probably just took, a wooden cane or something and just hit her. It looked like cane marks, just based on the marks.
How the hell would you know that?
Listen, we can discuss that later.
But
anyways.
Mitch, what kind of freaky stuff do you get up to in the bedroom?
Oh my god. Is it you're in a situation where it's you're trying to read a book because you can't read, and every time you say a word wrong...
What?
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 I'm not sure what to say about that. I have no... that was like a riddle. That was like a riddle there.
I'm trying to be as sensitive as possible with what I'm saying, knowing that it's gonna go out on the internet.
You guys know that I'm into, sexology and human sexuality and stuff like that.
Oh, so you want me
of course I would know that stuff.
Okay!
My favorite riddle is, I have a mouth, but I do not speak. I have a bed, but I do not sleep. I run, but I do not walk. I have a head, but I do not think.
Death?
River.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
Also, can we talk about how satisfying it was when Danielle punched Marguerite in the face for insulting her dead mom?
That, yeah, I'm not into,
Be gone, thought!
I'm not into violence, but damn, that was, unexpected.
I'm not into violence, but I am really into violence.
I do want to talk about how, you mentioned this, Juliet, how she burned the Utopia book.
Yeah.
The thing prevalent about that was she didn't have to. She straight up,
Yeah, Danielle gave the shoes, and she's like, psych, I'm gonna burn it anyway.
Here's one of your prized possessions and your entire life being destroyed because you punched me.
And we want to be symbolic about it. The fact that she is clinging on to Utopia, which is a pun, actually. I mentioned this to Juliet, but I didn't mention this to you about Utopia. It is a pun. There are two words in Greek that sound similar, but not exactly to it. And if you kind of mash the two of them together, it kind of sounds like the two pronunciations, you kind of mash them together, you get something that sounds like Utopia. One means a good place. The other means a place that does not exist.
Really?
Yep.
And Utopia was destroyed when the book burned.
But Utopia did not exist.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah, one thing I remember about Utopia, the only thing I know about Utopia, because I never read it since I don't know how to read, is the fact that Utopia itself had slaves. Which,
Which is especially funny considering that Thomas More was a humanist, and you kind of think they'd be... I don't understand enough about the humanist ideology, which is mentioned explicitly in this movie that we just saw, but...
Yeah.
I could have sworn they were not that super fond of it, but on the other hand, I could have sworn that Utopia is also regarded as a mild form of satire? Maybe?
I have no idea.
I don't know. And now Thomas More is canonized as a saint by the church, as a martyr.
Which church?
Catholic Church.
Because we do have to consider this is also when the Protestant Reformation was happening. The movie takes place at
True.
This is the nascent era of the Protestant Reformation we're talking about, the time period of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Let's also talk about the lengths that the Baroness and Marguerite went to get close to the prince. Like the scene where the Baroness has one of the king's servants steal a necklace from the queen's bedchamber so Marguerite can be like, "Oh, your majesty, you dropped this!"
Yeah, that was, at first I had no idea what it was gonna be that, he had given her, but once, that happened, I literally said out loud, oh, that's clever. That's a clever ruse.
Still not as bold as the boy Jones.
Can we talk about how they both lied to the queen to her face?
And the king calls them out for it. "Baroness, did you or did you not lie to Her Majesty the Queen of France?" And they're like, "Oh, shit."
Yeah, that was like these two really went at it. Like, you mentioned how she's like 2.0 of the Baroness.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Can we also talk about how Jacqueline, when she met Captain Laurent, Prince Henry's kind of like sidekick, they were both horsies at the masquerade ball.
That's great, honestly.
I just imagine they get plumped together.
They get plumped together.
Well, Jacqueline does seem to think a bit more about food, which they make fun of.
It's sad. It's like, really? Gonna make the fat jokes?
But I can just imagine the two of them just living happily, just kind of like, you know, cooking meals for each other and getting a bit plump and happy with each other.
Well, at the time period, wasn't it considered good to be plump because that meant you had food and you were wealthy?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, like, hey, you can't not love food.
Oh, hell no.
Like, it's food. I love food. We all love food.
We made food before watching this.
They straight up made, like... they straight up made, like, food before watching this, and we were eating it as we were watching it.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about Monsieur Le Pieux.
Dastardly rape lash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to say what I said while watching this movie. Monsieur Le Pieux is what Christian Grey from 50 Shades of Grey actually is when women stop romanticizing him and realize just what a psychopath he is.
When he's all, like, creepily, like, sniffing her hair and is like, you know, you remind me of that horse.
Please. Yeah.
Broken.
Ew.
No, it wasn't broken. It was, you need to be broken.
Like that stallion, yeah. And then he puts her in irons. Like, Oh, the anecdote I wanted to tell you. The guy who played Monsieur Le Pieux, Richard O'Brien, is the composer of the Rocky Horror Picture Show and starred in the Rocky Horror Picture Show film as Riff Raff.
Are you serious?
Yes, and he doesn't do many film roles after Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I think that Ever After as Monsieur Le Pieux was a role that he accepted after a quite long pause from being in film.
Riff Raff, you mean the creepy pale guy with the long hair?
Yee!
God damn. Was it with that guy in Playing Creeps? Wait, you do haven't... Wait, so you know about that, but you haven't seen the movie?
The college I'm at is doing it for the spring musical this year, so I'm going to be able to see it.
I have seen the movie. You two haven't. I guess we have another addition to the list.
We could make that a Halloween episode, honestly. That would be fun. Yeah, Monsieur Le Pieux.
Yeah, he's a creep. He's meant to be a creep, and they did it well.
Somehow even rapier than Pepe Le Pew.
Ah, yes, Pepe Le Pew. I'm guessing. I'd like to think that was a reference, honestly.
Almost certainly a reference.
Yeah.
Plus, it's also creepy when you think about, like, he's twice Danielle's age, so she's 18, he's 36, and he has rotten teeth. Ugh.
I'm surprised none of you guys commented on dental hygiene.
Yeah, no, I that's the thing about this movie. All the good people have good teeth, all the bad people have bad teeth. It's always the thing with these kinds of movies, even though there were... I don't really know the dental hygiene situation.
Actually, a lot of medieval people had better teeth than what people have nowadays.
What?
Huh.
Sugar.
Yeah, I guess
we cannot understate just how much sugar fucks up our teeth.
True, but they...
Like, seriously, like, you know, these people could go their entire lives without eating, you know, the amount of sweetness that we get in, like, a fucking candy bar at the supermarket for, like, what, 50 cents?
True, but a lot of these people, I don't think they had toothbrushes or something of the sort, right?
A lot of them had methods of cleaning out their teeth.
Yeah, like dipping a rag in water.
I mean, like, you don't, like, you know, animals can't brush their teeth, and yet their teeth don't fall out either. As long as you kind of keep to the simpler diets a lot of them ate, you know, their teeth could last. I mean, like, yeah, if you got an infection, you were screwed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it just out goes the tooth, and if you didn't have braces, you were screwed.
Yeah.
Because I don't know when exactly braces were invented, and I'm kind of terrified to imagine what the earliest ones looked like.
Wisdom teeth would be horrifying.
Getting them removed.
Wisdom teeth kind of operate on the presumption that you're going to lose a few, whether because of the occasional infection, or, you know, losing them in a fight, or losing them when one of them snags on a piece of bone while you're eating.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Ow.
Oh.
Moving right past that, let's talk about Gustav. Now, I have a question for both of you. I argue that if this movie came out now, the producers would look at the script and go, yeah, it's great, but you need to make a love triangle between Danielle, Henry, and Gustav. You can't just have a male character that's just her friend and her friend alone. Do you think that's something they would have done if this movie came out now?
This is something they would have tried back then. They probably tried this back then. Producers have been meddling since the dawn of time.
Yeah.
Executive meddling is what destroyed Alien 3, which came out before this one, I imagine. Probably.
I think it came out before this, yeah. And if the writers obviously said no, if that was the case, so good for the writers for not caving in on that one.
If that even happens.
If that even happened, yeah.
It's not a thing that's just coming up now. It's always been happening.
Yeah.
Just like remakes.
Yeah.
Remakes have always been happening.
They have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like Gustav was a good minor supporting character for Danielle to have. Like, the brother she never had. The best friend who, like, they could always, like, you know, do kid things together. And always supporting her. And, like, when her life was in danger, he admitted, yeah, I need to step up to the plate and get help for her.
Yeah, like, he was a minor character, but I think he did well in his role. And I do like the little thing at the beginning where she's throwing apples at the prince thinking it's him because, of course, Gustav would, of course, steal my father's horse.
No, she didn't presume it was Gustav.
She thought it was a thief.
Oh.
Yeah, why would Gustav, who lives there, steal the horse?
And
to
who knew
mess
her
with
father.
her, I guess?
He would never touch her father's horse in a million years. He knew that she'd kill him if he tried that.
Mm.
Now, Nate, were you able to find out that if Gustav was supposed to be Gustave Flaubert?
I didn't bother researching into that. Admittedly, I was more focused on the anachronisms present throughout the film as we were literally walking down the stairs.
He was writing
True.
a script real time about horrible inaccuracies in this movie.
Yeah.
That's
So-
a joke.
We don't use scripts.
No, we don't.
This is all free ball.
Yeah, Mitch takes notes about characters to keep their names in mind, but that's about it.
Yeah, I have horrible memory, and I just literally write down anything that happens in the movie that catches my attention and names of people.
So, do we think that Gustav killed the little servant guy when he dropped the clay pot on his head?
On one hand, this movie sometimes is wacky, so I can totally imagine them surviving that. On the other hand, if you're going with the realistic route that they try to go, if you dropped a clay pot on a dude's head from like 20 feet up, and in a time where they didn't really have, surgery,
Yeah.
well, at least safe surgery, you were screwed. I mean, like, actually, some of the earliest surgeries ever done were surgeries to relieve pressure in someone's skull due to a traumatic head injury.
Yeah, that's true.
And the freakiest thing is, there's a lot of evidence of them surviving those operations.
Yeah.
Literally, like 100,000-year-old skulls with healing holes in them.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
10%.
I've heard of those.
10% of Paleo and Neolithic skulls have those holes in them.
Mm-hmm.
That's honestly very disconcerting.
Mm.
How often were we getting hit in the head?
Yeah. I'd assume that, I mean, even if it was realistic, theoretically he could have lived, because I know people who have been hit in the head with worse things, didn't get medical attention, but still lived. And
Yeah, I have friends like that too.
And then sometimes someone just bumps their head against the door and then they go to sleep and never wake up. So,
Yeesh.
that.
yeah, humans are resilient to a lot of stuff.
Mm.
But if you hit us in a weak spot, we go down hard.
Yeah, it could have gone either way, frankly.
Mm.
I mean, he never did show up in the movie again.
No, he did not after that point. Oh my god, can you imagine though if he woke up, like, he probably had no idea what happened, and like, can you imagine, like, you're going outside to take a piss, and then all of a sudden, conk, you're like, unconscious. Ugh.
It was even worse, because he actually was taking a piss.
Yeah.
Looked up, saw it coming at him, and then got knocked out.
Clunk.
Not to mention, there was quite a bit of earth in that, wasn't it?
There was, like, coal or something.
Then it would be a lot heavier than just a clay pot. That
Yeah.
dude must have... I'm surprised that Gustav didn't have any blood on his clothes
Oh
when
god.
he swapped out.
The trajectory
yeah.
of it flying up.
Oh, yeah.
Oh god, I don't want to
Oh.
envision that.
No.
Oh.
I also thought it was, like, two cute moments that Gustav had in this movie was, one, when he meets Leonardo da Vinci, or, air quotes, meets, and it turns out to actually be the wrong guy, but he still passes out. And then when he tries to set up Danielle with the prince, he's like, oh yeah, the Countess is at home, alone, by herself. You could go there right now, and she'll be there. And then she's like, Gustav, you idiot, he's heading to my house. He's like, oh, I suggest you run. She's
Yeah,
like, oh, you bastard, I love you, thank you.
that was cute. I
Yeah.
liked that little moment.
Yeah.
Gustav is, like, number 2 in terms of this movie.
He's a bro.
But not where near much a bro as Leonardo da Vinci.
Oh, we're gonna
Yeah.
get to him, but we have a couple of minor characters to get out of the way. We do. We have. We'll group them all together. We have the servants that lived in Danielle's house, Paulette, Louise, and Maurice, and then we have the king and queen of France.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Henry's parents. I thought that the mother was, very loving.
She was a lot closer to Prince Henry than
Mhm.
his father was,
Yeah.
especially.
I mean, when you first see them in the movie, you can ultimately tell what kind of people they are when the queen goes, a sapling cannot grow in the shade of a mighty oak, Francis. He needs sunlight. And the king goes, no, he needs a good whipping. it's like you could tell what type of people they were on that one line alone.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But also, you could tell, like, at the end when the king talks to Henry alone that he really does love his son. He's like, I was worried about you and I didn't know how to tell you before.
Yeah, I actually did like that.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't have to do that, but it was cute. I liked it.
Yeah.
It did show some character progression, both with Henry and his father.
Mm. And then especially, like, both the king and queen at the very end, when, like, they're grilling the Baroness, they're just like, no holds barred, they are pissed. Especially when the queen's like, choose your words wisely, madame, for they may be your last.
Yeah.
Nate?
What about the monarchy?
King and queen.
Monarchy are parasites. Get out the guillotine. The fact that this movie takes place entirely within France, and yet they don't have a single revolution, disappoints me.
The revolution was... It was coming, but it wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
Why didn't the servants rebel against, the wicked stepmother? They should have just gotten out the, an improvised guillotine and communally shared the land that they were working on.
Well, the scene where they sell Danielle to Monsieur Le Pew, they are punching those men that are trying to take her away. They are fighting tooth and nail to make sure that she doesn't get taken away. There's not much they can do, but they are fighting to protect her.
Mm-hmm.
Because she went and rescued Maurice. They owe her a lot. I'm assuming it's through her that the Baroness even kept Paulette and Louise and didn't sell them off.
They're basically like Danielle's parents.
Yeah, they're her surrogate family.
They're basically replacing, the mice from, the Disney version.
That's literally
They need more revolution!
And also, if you look at one
They have nothing to lose but their chains.
And if you look at one detail in the movie, when you first see Maurice, you can very much tell that he manages all the other servants in the household. In fact, there's a whole line of people who work there on their farm. Then the next scene, it's just the 3 servants, and Maurice is no longer wearing his stately uniform. He is in rags. And you can just tell by that change alone what the Baroness has done to this house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with, how all the furniture was going missing, and she was... I knew instantly that the Baroness was selling it.
Yeah.
I knew immediately.
It's all the stuff.
Yeah.
Alright, let's talk about...
Leonardo da Vinci.
Yee! Alright, Da Vinci is the fairy godmother of this film, and I love him because he's sympathetic to Danielle, he makes wisecracks, but he's never doing it to hurt anyone, he's doing it to crack a joke, and he doesn't tolerate Henry's shit either. Not at all, especially the scene where he's chewing him out after the ball. He's like, she came here to tell you the truth and you fed her to the wolves. You don't deserve her at all. He wasn't afraid to call anyone out on their shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sometimes it's just a refreshing breath of air to have a character who, just cuts right to the core of it, just like Da Vinci does. And of course that he would do it because this is
Leonardo da Vinci.
one of the single greatest minds in the history of the human race.
Literally. Did you see those Jesus shoes he wore?
But I'm not even talking about movie Da Vinci. Real life Da Vinci was just an astonishing...
No, for real. He was incredible.
Now, Nate, when Da Vinci first appeared on screen, I'm surprised you didn't put 2 and 2 together when he was talking about the painting he's getting away.
I was having an inkling suspicion, but at the same time I was like, nah. They weren't going to put in Leonardo the fucking Vinci into this Cinderella story, and yet they did. And I was like, well then. Looks like I already have a favorite character.
Yeah.
And I love the joke he makes about why he's at the castle. The Sistine Chapel joke in this movie is great. Michelangelo was trapped under ceiling in Rome. I'm just a second choice. And then when he sets Danielle free and he's like, I shall go down in history as the man who opened the door!
Yeah. I guess that makes sense. Of course he'd be subversive and, pulling out the hinges instead of trying to deal with the lock.
He was an inventor. He knows how to make things work.
That's very true. They've showed him with, did he actually make a kite?
I wouldn't be surprised if he made a kite. He did try to make various flying machines, but they would not have worked in real life.
Yeah, that's true. I remember seeing some of those online.
I think they kind of hinted at it with, the kite that he made, that Danielle did. Let's talk about the scene where you guys were losing your shit, where he's walking on the water with his water shoes.
His Jesus shoes.
I was like, wait a minute, those are shoes shaped like boats? They're not actually gonna... And then, when Danielle is swimming, all of a sudden, into this peaceful scene, just suddenly... just like the fish coming into the Krusty Krab, just Da Vinci just walking on fucking water with his boat shoes.
It looks like rain!
Rev up those fryers, Mr. Krabs!
And that is when I immediately knew that this movie was simultaneously half-assing the idea of a realistic story and also just creating such a memorable moment. Of just this dude just out for a fucking stroll on the surface of a river.
And he's Da Vinci!
He was so ridiculous. I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop laughing.
And then he goes, I should leave walking on water to the Son of God. But fortunately I tripped over an angel. And I'm like, aw.
That was very smooth.
Yeah. There
just
were a
like
lot
his
of smooth
brush
lines.
strokes.
Just like his brush strokes.
Ayy. Alright, now, you guys mentioned that there are quite a few good lines in this movie. Did you have any favorites?
Pebble in the Shoe one was like, damn.
Oh,
yeah.
That was a rough one. One of my favorites was just the entire section where Da Vinci is talking with Henry about true love and, like, you know, finding your one significant other.
Mm-hmm.
It was mostly Henry at that point, but I did find that little discussion to be kind of interesting, because, like, yeah, he makes some decent points in terms of, like, at least in terms of religious aspect of, you know, your one true significant other.
Like Da Vinci says, you can't leave everything to fate.
Yeah.
She's got a lot to do. Sometimes you gotta, like, you gotta act, otherwise it won't happen unless you take a first step.
But, like, what do you guys think about, like, the whole one true love and all that stuff? Like, do you believe in you'll find the person, one person that will be perfect for you?
Okay.
I think there are several potential matches, but as time goes on, as you enter a relationship with one of them, it will become the only one.
I think that people who do get married and have that one true love are very, very honorable people, because that is not something everybody can do. But I also believe that it is possible to have many soulmates in this life, and it doesn't necessarily have to be romantic. It can be somebody that you have a connection with over a thing you're passionate about. It can be a friend, a parent, it can be anyone. It doesn't have to be a romantic soulmate.
Yeah, but they were talking about romance in this context.
Yeah.
Well, I like, actually, your interpretation. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, it's like Danielle's romantic match was Henry, but she also had a profound connection with Da Vinci because he understood where she was coming from, and she had a very deep love for Gustave as well, and she also had love for Jacqueline. But in terms of romance, she and Henry were very, very compatible.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if Da Vinci and Gustave...
No.
What?
I know what you're gonna say.
Da Vinci liked him young a bit. Not Greek young, but like, you know, this middle-aged dude having, you know, beefcake.
Yeah, he was,
It's widely believed that the Mona Lisa might, and, you know, we're just going to say might because there's no true way of knowing. And
Yeah,
it's entirely
no way to
possible
know.
that we're just talking out of our, you know, shapely asses here, but,
mhm.
you know, some people believe that, or I'm not sure if it's some now or if the opinion has become more widespread, that Da Vinci used a male lover for the modeling of the Mona Lisa.
It's theorized that he was at least bisexual, if not, you know...
Gay.
Yeah, gay.
Good for him.
Like, there was a lot of times where people would be talking about apprentices and, you know, they theoretically could have been his, what'd you call it, Nate? Boy toys?
Boy toys. But, like, yeah, you know, people in power let Da Vinci get away with a lot of stuff that they didn't personally approve of because this was Leonardo motherfucking Da Vinci.
Yeah.
This was a dude who, like, I believe managed to literally drain a swamp, who almost diverted a river. He almost stole a river. Basically, there was a rival city that had a good river flowing through it, and Da Vinci wanted to divert it through his city.
Are you serious?
I am quite serious.
Literally, well, why?
Because to rob them of a rich port, and also to make his city look good.
Oh my god.
Can you imagine that? If they literally stole your river? That you would never recover from that.
Da Vinci was determined to get the water, and Fidel Castro was determined to get the milk from Ubre Blanca.
You lost me there. I'm sorry, honey.
Castro was a notorious dairy nut.
Oh,
This
yeah.
guy
He bred a
would-
super cow.
This dude will eat like 18 scoops of ice cream after a meal. That's like 2 pints of ice cream.
That's relatable.
This dude spent a lot of money trying to make a sustainable dairy industry in Cuba.
Never worked.
He would try to breed cows that you were used to high climates but produce very little milk with cows that produce high degrees of milk but didn't like the hot climate to try to create a sturdy cow that would withstand the heat and also at the same time produce a lot of milk. Failures all around except for one cow.
Ubre Blanca.
who I believe produced more milk than any known cow.
I think
And
like 29 gallons or something like that a day.
A day?
Yeah.
Cows are big, man.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and when
Yeah.
it died, Castro built a statue of it. And we are hilariously off,
Off track. Back to the movie. But I do want to cut in and mention some sweet anecdotes that I have from this movie.
we were still talking about Ravinci.
Well, we were
I
talking
was
about our
gonna say-
favorite lines.
I was talking about the stuff he got away with because he was the dude who almost stole a river.
Nate is extremely excited to talk about Vinci.
Ravinci.
Well, like another thing that he got away with, aside from bumming, was he also is widely believed to have done some of the earliest detailed dissections.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which back then was a big no-no. You weren't supposed to defile corpses.
Mm-hmm.
Did he went grave robbing, right?
Yeah, he went grave robbing.
Yeah.
Well, he
Yeah.
didn't personally go grave robbing.
He had
I
other
think
people.
he paid people
He's
to
like,
do it.
hey, dude, go to this grave at midnight, bring back a body. Thanks.
Yeah, literally.
All right, so some sweet notes I want to bring out about this before our final opinions was, we're talking about our favorite lines. My mother's favorite line in this movie is, once upon a time there was a girl who loved her father very much. And that resonated with her a lot, after her dad died, but also resonated with me because it makes me think about how, my dad raised me as a stay-at-home dad for 8 years. And, just to see that connection that Danielle had with her dad, reminded me of my own. And then the scene where Maurice comes back, I mentioned this to the guys earlier, when Maurice comes back home, my mom always said that reminded her of when her mother was first diagnosed with cancer and the doctors were like, you have weeks to live, and then she proved them wrong by living a full year. My mom said that scene where Danielle brings Maurice home reminded her of when her mother was brought home from the hospital, and my mom and her siblings just hugged their mom like there was no tomorrow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You were mentioning that during the movie. That was like...
Yeah.
That hit me right in the feels, man.
That's why my mother loves this movie, because, it's about just the messages of unconditional love really resonated with her and really resonated with me.
Mhm.
So that's why there's a tender spot for it. All right, let us wrap up with our final thoughts. Let's go down the line. Nate, you start first.
No, Mitch should start first.
Yeah,
Okay.
please let me start
Oh, yeah,
first.
true. Mitch.
Although, as Nate has mentioned, it's not exactly historically accurate, even if it attempts to be, it is fairly good in terms of representing a Cinderella story.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it doesn't follow it beat by beat, it does definitely give good representations of what did happen, or what did happen in the classic tale. It gave different elements that was supposed to represent what happened in the original. Like the whole deal with Da Vinci being the fairy godmother instead of having a fairy godmother.
Which was amazing.
Which was incredible. But yeah, I thought it was fairly good in terms of that. I thought it was sweet. It wasn't as dark as I was expecting to be. And it's a good family film if you're into those.
Nate?
Ultimately, a half-assed movie. A movie that tries to be a realistic account. The true Cinderella story. That ultimately is full of anachronisms, unrealistic scenes, and a general sense of wackiness that kind of feels out of place. A movie that tries to make serious statements about classism, but ultimately also makes lots of jokes about the poor, and portrays the poverty as a fitting punishment instead of, an unfortunate situation the others must be pulled out of. A movie that tries to comment on the royalty, but ultimately half-asses that too. Overall, just a half-assed movie with some good lines, such as the pebble and the shoe line. Good characters, like Leonardo da Vinci, and good scenes. Said scenes being the ones with Leonardo da Vinci.
All right, time for my final thoughts. If you want a fairy tale movie that adds more substance to the female leads and takes a bit of a different twist on it, then definitely watch this movie. There's high rewatch value. It's a good movie to show young girls if you are worried about girls having maybe weak princess heroines to look up to, then definitely show them this movie. Good cast, very good acting, and to me it is no surprise when Drew Barrymore says that out of all the films she has done, this is her favorite.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. All right, that concludes this episode of How Have We Not Seen, and next episode will be Mitch's turn. Mitch, do you have a movie in mind, or do you want to leave us in suspense?
I do have a movie in mind. I think
Ooh.
you'll both like it. Next time, we'll be watching American Psycho.
Ooh!
Now I'm just imagining that Patrick Bateman just going, "You're next, pal," to his own movie.
Fun fact, American Psycho was made into a musical, and Ever After's being made into a musical right now.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and Matt Smith was the original lead
Are
in
you
London.
serious?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Wow.
It had a very short run.
Honestly, like, I'm surprised you two haven't seen American Psycho.
Oh, but I'm looking forward to it. I don't know about you, dude.
I'm looking forward to it a lot. I haven't. It's kind of weird that I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
I'm surprised, yeah.
It's based on
really
a book
surprised.
too, and I haven't read the
Yes,
book.
me neither.
Neither have I.
Because you can't read.
Yeah, that's right.
Disclaimer: Mitch is actually literate.
He is literate. Just to reiterate, he can read very well.
I've read 100 books by now in my lifetime. That's a lie.
Yes.
That's a lie.
He just doesn't read often.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the joke. But anyways, thank you for listening, and have a good night, everybody.
See you with American Psycho. Like and subscribe.
We're next.